And welcome back to Wrestling Mindset. Today we're here with the guy you probably don't know, Spencer Lee. Spencer, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it.
Awesome. We'll jump right into it. Actually, one of the questions that I didn't tell you about that I was thinking about, I saw an interview before with I think it was Terry Brands talking about Donn Ernst. Now, Donn Ernst was my coach.
Oh, no way.
Years ago. Donn was my first mentor back in 8th grade. And when I heard Terry say that you had a relationship with him, you knew him, I said, "Oh man, get out of here!" Donn was my coach. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, well, Don he would send me like CDs of matches that he thought that would be relevant to like me. And so that's kind of like, and it's funny because growing up, I always joke that I didn't know anything about college wrestling. I didn't watch my first like collegiate match till I was probably like a freshman in college or in high school. I mean, as in like a present college match. Like I watched Terry and Tom and Kale and all the greats in like the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, but I only watched freestyle wrestling. So I read books on freestyle wrestling. I mean, it's the only thing I knew. The only thing I cared about was the Olympics. I never cared about college. I didn't know college was such a big deal until I was like a sophomore in high school. And people started, talking about how recruiting is going to start happening in your junior year. So Donn Ernst would send me videos, like CDs of like world champions from like the Soviet Union and I mean every country. I mean he had so many different because that's what he did. He filmed matches that people don't even know are filmed from like these like 70s and 80s. And Terry has like a bunch of those CDs with him as well. So me and Terry used to always watch the film that he would send, and he would send me packets, and he would write stuff down, like what time to look at and what people would do and his interpretation of the wrestling. So I always thought that was pretty cool. So me and Don had a pretty good relationship, and he was a tough son of a gun. I mean, he was fighting a lot of illnesses towards the end of his life. And, he wasn't supposed to live like 10 years prior to that, and he was still kicking it. So I mean, that's a mental thing, my opinion. He wanted to still help people, and I saw him a lot. I didn't talk to him a whole lot because he didn't really use his phone much, but he would show up and Carver, I always had a long conversation with him. He always had something to give me. He was a very giving person. So.
Oh, extremely generous. Like I said, he was my first mentor back in 8th grade. And I mean, He took me under his wing. Any of those videos he sent you, you guarantee I've watched all of them dozens of times. But like the Russians, the Japanese, the Mongolians, all these guys, the Iranians, going back into the 70s. There was videos that he had that only him and ABC had rights to.
Yeah. No, you're right.
So it's ridiculous. And then like as soon as he retired, he got diagnosed with bone cancer. And from that moment that you saw, like from 2008, he fought it for 10 years, 10 or more years. Yeah. And there was one time he was in my basement, he was coaching me, and he had me do stand-ups. He said, "Okay, 20 perfect stand-ups, and then you're done." I'm sure every wrestler has done something like this. Now, this was before the movie Miracle, where they said again, again, again. Well, anyway, I get down from 20s, counting backwards. I get down to 15. That one wasn't right, back to 20. And he did that a few times to me when I down to 10. Anyway, we got down to 1, and then he's like, "Okay, one more time. One more time." So the workout began when I got down to 1. And this was before the movie Miracle. And when he got cancer, he reminded me, he said, "That lesson one more time is not just for wrestling. That's your whole life. One more time. Whenever you think you can't go, you got one more time." So he was a tough son of a gun.
No, that's a name, man. That's a blast in the past for me,
Oh, so. Yes. He was the Flow Wrestling before the Flow Wrestling. Anyway, when I saw Terry talk about that, I thought that was great. All right, so now we'll kick it into some of the other questions we had. So dealing with pressure, and one of the things I remember you talking about with Caden Henschel was that when you said that if you didn't tech a guy, people were, people look at it like, "Oh, what's going on? Spencer's off today," or "Wow, this guy's really good." If you don't tech or major a guy, talk about the mindset with that.
I think it was just hard because, like, as someone who's extremely hard on himself already, when you're not really supposed to read media and stuff, but like when it's always constantly being thrown at you, and like every time I have media day with like the Iowa media people or the local media, they would always ask the same questions, like, "Well, what did he do different?" And I'm like I remember going, "Well, I teched him in the second period," and they'd be like, "Well, he definitely figured you out," And I always was just like, to me, it was always like, the other guy wants to win too, and this is Division I wrestling at the highest level. I mean, how many wrestlers have you seen now that have been successful in college, just dominating the international scene? How many world champs do we have in like almost every weight class at U17, U20, U23? Like college wrestling, if you're a national champ, like you're probably good enough to win U23 worlds or U20 worlds, easily. And anyone who's won U20 worlds is always a top three guy at the NCAA tournament. Really, very rarely that they're not. So like if you're that good, like these guys are in the NCAA, like these guys are really, really good at wrestling. So I used to always get frustrated because like my motto is always respect all, fear none. And every single time I wrestle a guy, if I didn't destroy them, quote unquote, like the people would just like they would lose their minds, Oh, he was supposed to be my detective, but I was pretty impressed, It's just like it was almost. I mean, it's humbling a little bit because like of how people must have thought about me as a competitor. So if you look at it that way, that could be a positive, But yeah, it definitely is hard when like no matter what, like you almost feel like you have to live up to those expectations, and that does put pressure on you, and that does make it a little harder. And you shouldn't have to think like that, you should let that bother you. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't affect me even a little bit, even though I did everything I could not to have it affect me. But inadvertently, it definitely did. Because maybe I would win, 13-1 or something, and I'd freak out after the match, and the commentary would be like, "You're fine, like you did good stuff." Yeah, you might have stopped wrestling at this point in the match, should have kept going, should have kept doing what you were doing, that kind of thing. But again, like you said, it is frustrating, but I mean, I guess if you're in that position, it's not that bad of a position to be in. But
Right. It's like we have to operate from the assumptions the premise that number one, we're all human. And the other
yeah,
thing is this guy signed up for the sport too. He's trying to win as well. And these are some of the toughest people, not only in the country, but in the entire world. And they're
absolutely,
training just to beat you.
especially when target on your back for sure.
Exactly. So what might be now, okay, these other wrestlers, high school wrestlers, these college guys, they're not Spencer Lee, but some of them have what you had to a smaller extent, maybe at the high school level. What are some good things you might recommend them to do mentally and emotionally that they could tell themselves to not have as much weight on their back?
Well, I mean, like no matter what, every match to you should be the biggest in the world because it's the next one, right? So like that I mean that could help you because you could always see the next opponent as like, a world final, Olympic finals opponent, because no matter what, then the score won't matter. Tom and Terry are always big advocates of like staying away from social media. I know it's a little harder in today's era. Social media might help you get, deals or whatever, in the collegiate and even in high school at this point, honestly. So I understand that can make it a little harder, but like I said, you saw me the interview with Caden. He's someone he's like our wrestling's only YouTuber, like, and so like some people like in this era, it's a little different, but I do also agree with Tom and Terry. You should stay away from it, a little bit. You shouldn't be reading things. You shouldn't be like going through comments. Like that's just stuff that all it's going to do is, weigh on you mentally. And it's just not what you want to do, not where you want to be. You want to be as focused as possible. And, whether that's writing things down, whether that's, whatever you have to do to get ready for that match, And for me, it was always just worrying about that day's practice or the next day's practice. I never like to think about the opponent or what they did or during the week because, like, you get nervous, you stress yourself out a little bit. Like me, I would get nervous if I thought about what they did or if I watched film on them. I'm not saying watch film is bad, but I never really watched film because I would on myself or on anyone because I would get nervous or whatever. So for me, it was always just like, how can I feel better? It was like writing down what I did good that day, what I could have done better, and then maybe applying that to the next day. So that was kind of how I was.
That's great. So that's the approach before the match. Now let's zoom into a match. Okay, so let's say I don't know, a guy gets a first takedown. It could happen, right? Or a guy gets a
Absolutely.
reversal. Or it's like, hey, the first period ends, second period ends. You're up by a point. You're up by 2 points, or maybe you're down by a point or two. What would be good things that you tell yourself that you'd recommend other people to tell themselves?
Well, Tom and Terry are pretty big advocates of that because like Terry in college he said he'd always imagine himself being down 2-0 in a match because he gave up the first takedown on like most of his matches, like 90% of his matches, because he was so aggressive, like almost overly aggressive, that he would go to. So before the match even started, he'd always say he's down 2-1 because he's gonna get out, right? And that's just kind of how he went through it. For me, it was like it didn't matter. Like I was someone who didn't really show much emotion on the mat, like my facial expressions or anything. To me, it was just like as long as your body is moving and your hands and feet are moving and you're wrestling, then the scoring is going to happen. It doesn't matter if they score first. Like you just get up and you just keep scoring. You know, the more you think, I think the less effective that is. I think wrestling's a instinctive sport. And if you're constantly telling yourself to just do it, you know, Tom and Terry always say, don't think, just do it. You know, and that's kind of like what wrestling should be like in a match. You get blasted off your feet. Like you shouldn't even like once you hit the ground, you should already be on your feet. Like that's how it should feel. Like you shouldn't be like, oh wow, I got taken down. And then all of a sudden you get chopped and all of a sudden you're on your face, right? Like, oh, that never happens. I never get first period. You know, you should already be on your feet and turning and just keep wrestling. Cause you know, we have a lot of guys like that in our team that like I like to tell them like, hey, if they take you down, one takedown's not gonna be enough to beat you. That's all that matters. Just next thing, you know? So
Right. So that might be a good like reset button to tell yourself that
yeah.
if you get scored on, you just tell yourself just get right back or just do it. Just something quick. Maybe you tell yourself. Do you?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I never thought I didn't like thinking if I was like cognizant in a wrestling match, I was wrestling bad, like really bad. Like the match was like at stake, to be honest. You know, and it's only happened to me a handful of times. But like what you if you're like that means you didn't have a good enough warm up or like you weren't like ready to go, you know, because like to me it was like the best matches I ever wrestled were when I'd walk off the mat and be like, how did I even score? You know, I don't even know what happened. You know, and Terry would be like, oh yeah, you did. Like, how did I even take him down? Like, I wouldn't even remember just because like you're just moving, right? And that means you're ready to go in my mind. I mean, and everyone could be different. Some people like DeSanto's not like that. Like he's always telling himself what he needs to do in his head, and he's constantly thinking. You know, very different from me. You know, they're just an example. You know, everyone's different. So find what works for you.
Right. And now what about if a guy, a guy's clearly clamming up, trying to stall, he's trying to keep it close. That could be frustrating for a lot of guys. So it's the same thing. It's not that you don't want to be telling yourself a lot, but in that moment, might you have to tell yourself something to keep your composure?
Well, I mean, I don't think you need to tell yourself something because I think there are ways to do it because like Tom and Terry are big on like a reset point. Tom and Terry always looked at their thumbs, and that was like the reset point. You know, you don't have to speak. You know, like to them, you could see them. They go like this. They look at it and I mean, like this would mean like it's go time. You know, so some people it could be anything. It could be like whatever it is to you. It could be touching something. It could be like I don't know a reset. You could look into like what a reset point is or a comeback point or whatever it's called. That could be what brings you back to reality without having because I still think that like if you're thinking like oh man I'm not doing very well like you're already like you're kind of out of it, you know, like you're gonna be thinking and your reactions are slower. It'd be like thinking oh I need to dodge rather than just dodging, you know, like a punch or something, you know.
No, that's absolutely right. And the words actually activates more of your left brain, which is more like analytical and theoretical. When you're just looking at something, that activates more of the right brain, which is more like emotions, feel, and flow. So that makes sense right off the bat with what you're saying there about that reset point.
Yeah, no, that's what we think about it, you know. So
no, it's great. Now talk about also mentally dealing with wrestling people that you looked up to when you were younger. Okay, so like you wrestling Nico Megaludis and Logan Stevers in his corner, guys that you look to, and modeling yourself after, at least to some extent, maybe, right? So
yeah, it's kind of funny because those are like the only two guys I looked up to growing up that were like in the era, you know. So it's like Nico is from my high school, and then so I was always trying to be like him, and then Logan was like the guy that I kind of like emulated my top style off of for folk style. And he was like the guy that I was like always wanted to be like in college, right? So it just made me laugh at like they're both like in the corners like against me, kind of, just like makes you feel kind of old, even though obviously I'm not old, but like you're getting there out of college, So I mean, it was fun. I mean, me and Nico, like, we're cool. Like I was like I would love to wrestle him again, just because like like I said, he's a great opponent and he's someone that I've always looked up to and I always wanted to wrestle. So kind of goofy that we wrestle like the Bill Farrell and not like. To me, it always should have been like a World Olympic Trials, like something like that. But we'll probably end up wrestling there too. So
the time is now to take your mindset to the next level with Wrestling Mindset. Make sure you go to our website, wrestlingmindset.com, and sign up for your free trial session today. Don't wait any longer. You want the mental edge right now. When you sign up for the free trial session, you're also going to get a copy of our free ebook, Building the Predator Mindset. This book has helped thousands of people build confidence, relax under pressure, get motivated, and build mental toughness in wrestling, school, and life. Make sure you sign up for your free trial session today.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty cool. I mean, yeah, definitely mentally, it's definitely a little harder because like you have so much respect for them. Like I know Tom was like you respected him too much in the match, is what I was told. Just because like, I mean, like to me it was like, oh, it's Nico, like I remember being like 8 years old, watching him like win stuff, and like in high school, 9 years old. And I think he's only 5 or 6 years old. I think he's 6 years older than me, maybe only 5 years older. But that's a pretty big significant gap. Like I remember being like in junior high and he was in college, making the national finals when I was in eighth grade. So like those are like things that definitely like weigh on your mind a little bit. Like, oh, this is the like what guy you look up to. I've never had that problem because I never like looked up to like that many people in the wrestling world like in that kind of way. Just because like to me, I always like would say to myself like I'm gonna be better than them. I'll surpass them. Like there's no like hero. Some people are like, oh, you're my hero. But is my mic okay? I said switch to the okay, there we go. You can still hear me? Okay. And so to me it was just like there are people I want to emulate my wrestling off of, and then all of a sudden now I'm wrestling them. So it was just kind of funny. I mean, I thought that was cool. It was fun like having my dad and like Nico's dad like kind of almost like they were like almost next to each other like we were wrestling, just because like see we know each other for a long time. So you're still muted.
That's awesome. That's a great experience to have, even though it's like, yeah, maybe a little weird, a little different, but yeah, just
Yeah.
another great thing.
Yeah, well, that's the beauty of wrestling, man. There might be someone that took a picture with me, uh, and all of a sudden I might be wrestling in 4 years. You never know. I mean, I know there's an example. There's a kid I wrestled from Wyoming last year. He posted a picture of taking a picture with me when I was at the Powerade tournament, like in high school. I was like a freshman or something, and he was like up to my hip, and I had to wrestle him. I think he's a junior world champ. Yeah, so he's
Oh, yeah,
tough. So
you're gonna be the guy that gets that a lot. A lot of those younger guys who took pictures
it
with you.
maybe, yeah, maybe that'd be cool. That'd be cool. But
Oh, definitely. Definitely. All right. So my nephews, they really look up to you. They run out to the Pokemon theme song before wrestling. He has 14 Charizard cards. So is that good? Is that good for him?
yeah, sure. Well, I mean the most expensive cards in the world are like first generation Charizard cards. So those cards can range from like a couple thousand to even hundreds of thousands of dollars, which is absurd. But
It is. But now running out to those songs, you feel like that's good because that keeps you kind of calm. Like it feels like the energy is going, but it's not like, we're making you crazy.
well, like the reason why I ran out to Pokemon theme song was because the only game I played growing up was Pokemon. Like, and I would travel like on trips, like to camps and tournaments and whatever. I had like my little Game Boy, and then I had DS, and I had a 3DS. Then I had now it's a Switch. I'm 25 now. It's a Switch, so it's like it was like for me it was like the lyrics and then how much time I put in to traveling to get better with wrestling, like all the hours in the car that we did to just to get partners and coaches and stuff. And every single time I would drive, like I wouldn't drive, my dad would. I would be playing Pokemon. So like it was like it meant a lot to me. And then the lyrics of the song are obviously like I want to be the very best, like no one ever was. So it's like the lyrics mean something because like I do want to be the very best. Plus it also reminded me of why I was there and what it took to get there. So like not only was it like funny that I ran out to the Pokemon theme song, but like it really had a larger meaning to it to me. Like when I heard that song, it was like this is why I'm here. And I know that's like goofy to think, but like that's how I think. Like that like I don't know how many hours we drove. I mean, we drove 2.5 hours one way, both ways, 4 days a week for 8 years, maybe more. Like, I mean, my dad ruined cars driving, and he always bought me the new Pokemon game. I always beat it. And I was just like, for me, like reminded you of why you're there. So
There's definitely something to it, having a song like you feel good and you get that good flow. I remember in the Flow documentary on Terry, where he said when he heard in the 2000 trials, when he heard the Snowy River song, and he said, I knew it was my tournament."
yeah, yeah. No, there's definitely things like that can help you like get grounded. So
Absolutely. So now, what advice would you give to 8-year-olds or under? What could, like, just how to keep it fun? How to, I know it's so young, right? But you have these guys looking up to you, probably hear that. Well, what kind of things would you tell them mentally, emotionally, and then also like what kind of moves do you recommend starting kids with?
Well, it's funny. My dad always he was pretty cool when I was like younger. I'd always like be playing Pokemon in the stands or with my buddies or something. Then he'd be like, "Oh my gosh, you're about to be up," and you run out of the stands and go wrestle, and then you go back and I'd be playing Pokemon again. Like it was just like it was always about being like it's always about fun. Obviously that changed a little bit when he started to notice that I was good at a very young age. I was, you know, I mean, gosh, I don't even know how many times I lost from 8 years old to like 18, maybe like 15 times, you know, like I like never lost. And that's not like I'm not bragging or too. It was just like, it went from being like all fun to like, hey, this is like he could be good. I remember like my dad telling my mom, like they told my mom that like, hey, we're gonna have a lot of wrestling in our life. Like, I think he could be legit, like, because my dad was a national judo coach for like the Olympic team. He coached Olympic silvers and Olympic bronzes. He never coached Olympic champs, but because men's judo's never had an Olympic champ. But he did coach a silver and some bronzes and a lot of Olympians. He's seen what it takes at that level. Even when I was younger, he could tell. My mom always made fun of him, like, "Oh, come on, Larry, like he's so young, you don't know that." And like my mom was also an Olympic judo athlete, so she knew too. But like she's always making fun of him just because like she was less serious than he was. She was more like me, like the kind of like the freak athlete that like was more about having fun. My dad was like the typical like not super good athlete like for judo, but like just insanely hard worker. Just wanted it so bad. So they're kind of a cool combo, for like coaching as parents. And so I knew that like it's just like it's different, when you're. But like for me, like the advice would be like mostly about having fun. It's all about having fun, like especially like in a group of kids. Like the most fun times I remember was traveling to tournaments with like a bunch of kids, like in a long car ride, and we're all like on our DSs, like playing together, or like just like cheering on the guys, warming them up, like going out to eat after. Just like those are memories like I'll never forget. So like it was always like find like a support network of friends and to like do it with together, because it's nice for your parents too, because they can have someone to support. Someone could take them on rides, like to tournaments and camps that like you can't with work. So like to me it was always like find a group of friends to like you know try and achieve your goals together and make sure it's fun. Make sure those are your friends for like almost for life. And obviously like make sure it's fun. Wrestling's all about fun, because I hate the word burnout, because you can't burn out if you love it. If you just love it every single day, like how do you burn out? So like, and that's like something parents always say, like, how do I stop a kid from burnout? Like, make sure he loves it. My dad always made me take a month off, like in August every year. I would be a month no wrestling. I used to get so mad because like after like 2 weeks, I'd just be freaking out. Like he's like, no wrestling. Like then I would come back and like I'd be better at wrestling, and people wouldn't believe my dad that I didn't wrestle for a month. Like they'd be like, where'd he train? Like where was he going? And he hasn't done that at all. Like my dad would be like, he hasn't done anything. He's just been running. Just playing airsoft, like just enjoying himself. And like I think it's good to have breaks like that when you're younger for sure. You don't want it to be like a job when they're younger. And I think some parents might be a little too extreme about that. It's still about having fun. So
No, makes sense. If you're going to start a wrestler from the top, what are some of the things you might like, a neutral, a top, and a bottom, to give them a solid foundation? Like everyone wants like the tricks. What are the tricks? But it's not the tricks. It's like how would you, what kind of techniques, or where would you
man.
start them? Neutral, top, and bottom.
Well, I mean, I worked mostly top and bottom growing up because I knew that in high school and junior high that the coaches would be mostly working on neutral only. So like my like main focus was top and bottom, because I mean it's true. I was in high school and even in the college rooms, you don't work on bottom or top nearly as much as you do neutral. That's just because most of your career is going to be neutral. Like obviously the big difference between high school and college is usually top and bottom. Maybe less now than even when I was a freshman in college. The wrestlers are evolving so much in high school now. But for me, it was always top, bottom first, and then neutral. So maybe that's like some advice I'd give. I mean, I'm very basic. I mean, I just like I do anything like super funky or crazy. Like I've been hitting the same moves since I was like 8 years old. I could literally pull up a match of me when I was 8, and you would see me hit like a fireman's into a tilt. Like I swear on my life, like that. Like I remember showing some of my buddies about it. They didn't believe me. I remember like showing like my like Tulsa finals like match, and just I go out there and I like snap the kid down, go behind and hit a roll under tilt, and I'm like 9. It's like I haven't changed. I just like improve those positions a little bit every year, and you obviously get older and better, and so like to me, it's like find what your kid's good at and just make them the best at it, and that's like there's no like secret, you know.
Right. No, makes sense. Changing gears a little, talk about influence of your coaches. I know we probably hit on this the last time we spoke, but talk about Jody Stripmatter, talk about Brands Brothers and Morningstar and those guys over there.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, like I said, finding a support network like that is super important. I mean, I got really lucky. I had great coaches my whole life. You know, I started out like, with Eric and Scotty Burnett in Ohio. And then obviously Jody was Young Guns. Those are the two clubs that I went to. Burnett trained and Young Guns. Those are two clubs that I grew up going to. And then obviously, in college, Tom, Terry, Morningstar, Telford, my coaches, just like the influence they have on you. So like make sure you find someone that fits with you, that coaches you right. That was like a big thing for me. Jody was awesome. Jody and John and Joey, they were all awesome when they were coaching me in high school and junior high. They were they were like always watching film and always trying to find positions that they think they could help me improve. And I think that was something that made them such a great coaching staff, club coach, because it was never like going through the motions. Like it was always like we had to get better, had to do this, had to do that, And that's like how it is at college too, like how can we get better every single day? And so like that's why I always like say finding the place that feels like family to you. I've always felt like I was accepted like almost into these people's families, and I think that's like, very, very like, for them, like it's like it describes them as people. And I think that's pretty cool. I was always like super impressed about the people. And I was very, very lucky to have the people that I had in my life growing up as coaches and as, mentors and more even, so.
Right. Yeah, and I guess if feeling that over at Iowa, because I guess a lot of people, a lot of people thinking you're in Pennsylvania, probably shooing to go to Penn State because they're killing it and everything. And then you went to Iowa, and a lot of people are like, oh wow. I said, but yeah, but if you look at the Brands brothers, their personality and just the feeling at Iowa, it's a special feeling. Not to say it's not special other places too, but
Mhm.
if that feels more like home for you, you'd go there.
Well, that's exactly what I mean. Like you just got to find a place where you feel like it's the right place for you, and that could be anywhere. It doesn't have to be at Penn State or Iowa, like the number 1, 2 schools every year. It could be anywhere. And I think that's like very important, because there's a lot of people that are successful at other places, you know. So you just gotta find what's best for you and what makes you feel like you can be the best version of yourself. And like I always say, it's like finding a family is what I always tell people. That's what I call it. So
Makes sense. And I always feel like, hey, I mean, I wasn't at that level, but as far as wrestling, like, it would have been awesome to wrestle for the Brands brothers. I mean, I wrestled over at UPenn, but I'm
mhm.
thinking about watching those guys, and like it just really seems like they believe in each of their athletes. And I know a lot of coaches say that, but it just seems like they are really in their guys' corner, and they really believe they can win. Like not all American win, like national champion win. Every guy.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that they're extremely, extremely loyal to that. They like live and die by the athletes. So it's pretty cool.
That's awesome. Now, another question about just mentally bouncing back from injuries. That a lot of kids deal with that. A lot of
Mhm.
athletes deal with it, and for a lot of people, an injury will break them mentally and emotionally. And other guys will bounce back and be even better than before. How do you do that?
Well, it was always just one day at a time for me. Like like when you get hurt, like yeah, it might feel like the world's ending, but like for me, like I got hurt a lot. So like I was very used to like the feeling of like, all right, like how can I get better? Like what's the next thing? How can what's the fastest route for me to get back on the mat? And I was like every single time. So like it was like one day at a time, whether it's like talking to the doctors, whether it was surgery, whether it was not having surgery, whether it was taking 6 months and just rehabbing, whatever the the recipe that we had created for success was, and that was like, for me, it was just one day at a time, next best thing, next day, next thing, next thing, just not thinking about anything else but that, because I mean, all you can do is stress yourself out and make yourself frustrated. if you don't think that way, you know. You're not going to be able to get back on the mat faster if you're just stressing and struggling to try and get back, you know. You might as well put all into it. So
Right. If you're looking like why me or why does this happen or you know what other people are healthy, it just throws you off completely. If you're just focusing on, hey, how can I get better? How can I even improve while I'm hurt? Like you were saying, that changes everything.
yeah, I wrote like a blog post for Rudis. And the big thing I said was, instead of why me, why not me, you know? And the reason I said that was because I remember when I won my third national title and I had both my ACLs torn, I remember like telling Tom, like, I'm glad it's me and not any of my other teammates. And he kind of like laughed and was like, why do you even say that? And I was like, because I can do it. I'm not saying they can't, but like I know I can do it. And I don't want anyone else to go through what I'm going through. Like it's better, like for me, it was like it's better off being me than anyone else, you know, just because, not because I didn't believe that anyone else could do it, or I'm not believing in my teammates, but like I said, like I knew I could do it, and like I'd rather be the one that had to do it hurt than anyone else. So that makes sense. Like, why not
Awesome.
me?
No, absolutely.
So,
That's it.
yeah,
That's the mindset of a champion. That was gonna be the last question I asked about talk about your sponsor, well, about your sponsors, Rudis, and how then,
yeah,
like you said, you wrote that article for them. So
yeah.
we'll have to throw that link in the show notes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's good. It's just like a short little brief of like, you know, going through like tough times, and like instead of being like down on yourself, you can like, you know what, this is a battle that I can win, and that's why it was given to me, you know.
Absolutely. That's awesome, Spencer. Thank you very much for everything. Hey, when's the next time you're competing?
We'll see. Maybe the Open. We'll see. If not, I don't know when. So
All right. Awesome, Spencer. Great stuff. Thanks for everything. Appreciate it. A lot of
yeah.
golden nuggets of information that I hope our viewers are watching and not just looking. And this is something Donn Ernst taught me also. He said, don't just watch the champions and say, wow, great, Spencer Lee, great. No, listen to what he's saying. Listen to these little bits of information because it could go a long way. It's awesome. That's the mindset of a champion. So thanks a lot, Spencer. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. If the great Donn Ernst said it, that means you should listen.
That's right. That's right. Oh, he forced me to listen. He'd hit me.
I love Donn. He was
He's a
awesome.
good guy. Oh yeah. All right. Thanks, Spencer.
Yep,
Take
no
care.
problem. You too. See ya.